seeing in Los Angeles is chaos that is provoked by the administration. When you raid Home Depot and workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic. And deploying federalized troops is a dangerous escalation. This comes.
So, one of the things that's going on largely in our country right now are a lot of protests. A lot of people have come together in lots of cities, including Los Angeles, even Houston, as well as New York City, to name a few. This coming Saturday, they will be protesting what's called a No Kings protest. This will also be the day that Trump has a large parade. I think it's his birthday, but I'm not sure if the parade is specifically for his birthday or servicing another purpose. But he did mention that there will be consequences for those protesting on Saturday. Now, the concern is that 99%, despite what mainstream media is showing, 99% of these protests are peaceful. What's happening in Los Angeles, like Ms. Bass did say, has been somewhat provoked by the administration. The protests there were largely peaceful until the president deployed the military and a lot of police showed up. Until then, it was largely peaceful. If you look at the protests that are occurring in New York City, there's such a large amount of people that show up for protests there. And despite the number of people that show up in New York City, the protests are largely peaceful. The people are there just trying to make their voices heard. They're, chanting and walking. Pretty much that's it. There's no rioting or looting or breaking into things or burning things. However, the military specifically has not been deployed there. So I would say that has a lot to do with it. When people are fearful and feel that their backs are against the wall, what are they going to do? Large amount of people fight. And then you do have those persons that have the reject spirit, the defiant spirit, the dissenter spirit, where anytime there's a large amount of, authority, someone's telling them what they can or cannot do, they have this spirit to where they want to reject it. They want to defy it. And they do everything they can in their power to defy that order. If you say no, their spirit says, you're not going to tell me what I can't do. And what do? They defy that order radically. They just do everything that they can to come up against that authority. And I believe that had there not been deployment of such large military and, the Marines and everyone that was coming out there, had that not been the case, you'd more than likely not see as many things burning, as much rioting, as much looting as you do see in Los Angeles. Because in the other cities, you don't see that much. You do see officers being what I would say mean to the protesters. They're pushing them down. If they get within 6 feet of them, they're literally walking over and pushing them to the ground pretty much. And, it's kind of, odd to see, really.
And let's talk a little bit about it. Someone behind me threw a water bottle that got about fucking a quarter of the way to the police officers, and they started shooting right at us. They're looking for any fucking reason to hurt these people. It's disgusting. I'm having to move back more and more. My angle's getting worse and worse. They're starting to shoot in every direction. They're just kind of letting shots fly. They don't really give a fuck.
So the problem with this is, as you can see, it's largely peaceful out there. No one's looting, nothing's burning. And if they're getting within like 5 feet of the police, they're shooting at them. Like he said, someone threw a water bottle. And of course, there's no good reason for throwing things, but it's just a water bottle. I mean, a water bottle is not what I would think is not nearly a good reason to start shooting a bunch of bullets at people. I wouldn't think. And it doesn't sound like these are rubber bullets that they're shooting. I've been in a lot of chats, and a lot of people are, and I'm going to say one thing I've noticed is that a large amount of people that are supporters of this current administration, they're doing a lot of advocating for the Insurrection Act and the martial law. I'm not sure if that's a supposedly blocked word on YouTube. I don't know. I noticed that I said it a few times in chats, and my comment got deleted. So I'm not sure if that's a blocked word to even say or text on YouTube or not. But a large amount of this administration's supporters are in support of that. And I kept saying that something like that would harm a lot of innocent people. I'm not in support of the, let's just say ML. I'm not in support of that. I just feel like that would give the military reasons, that would give people reasons to harm a lot of innocent people. And I care about people. I don't think that there are people at the head that necessarily do care so much about people. But I don't think that it's good to just find any reason to just shoot at innocent people that are exercising their constitutional right to protest. They're not burning anything. They're not rioting, looting. They're not harming anyone. They're just making their voices heard. If they're doing that within 6 feet of you, I don't think that's a reason to be, I'm sorry, y'all, the trash guys. They usually come earlier. But I just don't think there's a reason to be firing into a crowd of unarmed, innocent people that are simply practicing their constitutional right to assemble, or to protest. I just don't agree with that, which is another reason why I have an issue with what's supposedly going to happen on Saturday. Apparently, the current administration has said that anyone that will be protesting on Saturday, they don't want any protests on Saturday. They just want everyone to attend this their parade and no protests. And if anyone protests, they will, have they will be met with resistance. And I just I don't anyone that's breaking the law, of course, should have to suffer those consequences, right? I don't advocate with rioting or looting, damaging things, harming other people, harming other people's businesses or homes or anything like that. I don't advocate for that at all. If you're breaking the law, I feel like the law should deal with you. However, if you're practicing your constitutional right to protest, and you're just making your voices heard, you're just, letting people know, hey, I disagree with, your stance on and your practices, what you're doing with immigration currently. If that's all you're doing and you have a constitutional right to do that, I don't understand why you're being met with resistance. Well, I don't mean legal as in it's legal. I mean, when you're dealing with military, I'll say military resistance, to keep you from practicing your constitutional right. And I don't understand military personnel that would stand for that, knowing the oaths that they took as military personnel when, upon their entering the military. So if they're going to stand out there and fight citizens that are practicing a constitutional right, I think that's in violation of their own oaths. But, that's just me.
We're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. Let our country be torn apart.
So President Trump evidently deployed troops to Los Angeles in opposition to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. So despite he didn't ask permission, he didn't consult with them first, he just, commandeered the whole thing and had the troops deployed. The National Guard he sent out there. And so at this time, he is going to be sued because of that action. I think that our current administration does a lot of actions like that, where they don't necessarily follow, quote, the chain of command, unquote. Anytime you're in business, most people are aware that there is a chain of command, right? That you have to follow. If you're an employee, you go to your manager goes to, a CEO or whatever. There's a chain. If you're a simple employee, you can't directly contact the CEO because it's out of the chain of command. Our present administration does a lot of things like that that are against the chain of command, where he'll do something, then he'll have to suffer the consequences after he's made that action, because it wasn't necessarily the right call to make. It was against, the House of Representatives, or, the Supreme Court has to deal with him, there will be lawsuits filed and things like that because he made a judgment call that was not necessarily in accordance with law or the chain of command. He didn't get whatever approval that he was supposed to get ahead of time. Although Mr. Trump is the president, he's not the end all be all. The buck doesn't start and stop with him. And I think oftentimes he forgets that. And he makes judgment calls because maybe he thinks that in his position, the buck should start and stop with him. Maybe he's not aware. Well, I'm not going to say he's not aware. It's his job to be aware of what the chain of command is. Before he makes certain actions, he's supposed to be aware of who he needs to contact, what he needs to do ahead of time before he makes those judgment calls. And I think a lot of times he just doesn't, excuse my French, he just doesn't give a shit. and he just does it, whatever he wants to do. And I think that's sad because he's having to deal with the consequences of that. And because he's having to deal with that, the Supreme Court are having to deal with it. That's spending a lot of taxpayer dollars because of all of these lawsuits. He's already dealing with a lot of lawsuits because of the jobs that were lost and, you know, a lot of calls that were already made, right? So they're having to deal with a lot of things because he makes these decisions, maybe that are not necessarily well thought out, or the right chain of command wasn't taken. And I'm trying to mince my words or think a little bit better before I just open my mouth and say stuff. So, but you know, I think I've seen a lot of comments where people are actually, you know, saying things like he doesn't have to get permission from anyone before he does this and that, and he does. He, or maybe not always permission, but he's got to at least run it by somebody. You know, he can't just send troops out to California without discussing that or talking to the persons of that area first. If the persons of that area say, no, we don't need that, we can handle this with blah, 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 then he should take that into consideration. Let them do their processes first to see if they can get it under control. And if they can't, then they'll speak to you about sending out the military. But just for Trump to just go completely over their heads, not give them the opportunity to address it or handle their processes, and just straight up send out the National Guard, that was not necessarily the best call. Naturally, you know that a mayor, that a governor are quote unquote beneath the president in level of government position, naturally. But they still have the right to make their processes, to do their what they can to try to get their city under control before you just deploy a bunch of military. You know how much that's costing the American people? That's another thing that really kind of upsets me. And, you know, we're already talking about the American people. Like, we're already damn near in recession. Jobs are not necessarily all that great. The cost of living is going crazy. And the deficit is like, wow. And then despite all of that, you're deploying a large amount of military for something that may have been able to be handled without it. And then apparently this thing on Saturday, the cost so far is the last I heard was $134 million. There's going to be a large amount of military presence. They're requesting some military suits because it's supposed to go over the military, how the military has progressed over time. So I think what they're going to do is, it sounds like what they're doing is taking the military uniforms and showing how they've changed over time. Well, you're getting all of these uniforms that have not been, what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't been tailored, fitted specifically for any military person. So whoever can fit that the best is going to jump in that, uniform and try to do whatever it's going to be raining. It's going to be moist and hot out there, and they're going to have to do whatever they're going to have to do in this uniform that best fits them, but probably really doesn't. I mean, I don't, and the amount of money that it's costing them to get all of this, the military personnel and these uniforms, it's costing, like I said, the last I heard, $134 million. And I just feel like there was a better way that they could have done that for less. I don't think that, and this is me, I've never really been a big celebrator of birthdays. I've never really had birthday parties of my own. I'm one of those persons that likes to blend into the background. So I don't need to be the center of attention. I don't really care for it. But I feel like there should have been a less expensive way to do this. He could have consulted with somebody and came up with a better idea that wouldn't have cost so much. There could have been a better way to do this with less costs to the American people. I don't want to be one of these people. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, like I said. But from what I see, it seems as though, based on past experiences, when a Republican gets at the head, it usually costs the American people more money. It just costs us money. They tend to be more extravagant with their spending, which is crazy enough because they're billionaires, right? Why does it cost us money that we don't have when they are billionaires? Help me understand that. But let's look at some more footage.
This morning in Seattle, the dust is settling after an intense night of clashes between police and protesters downtown.
What began as a peaceful rally in Cal Anderson Park on Capitol Hill, protesting immigration raids, moved downtown, and a small group started causing chaos and violence.
Now, my question would be, okay, so there's always one sect of people that strictly show up for the looting and the rioting and try to cause problems, steal stuff, and things like that, and that's sad. I think that's very unfortunate. And however, like they said, it was largely peaceful. My question would be, was it peaceful before the cops showed up? Had the cops not been there at first and it was peaceful? And then once the cops showed up and ICE or whoever, once they all showed up, then did it begin? All of the problems and the burnings and the firecrackers and all that stuff, is that when all of things got to a head? That's my question.
Were there when someone threw a firework at an officer, prompting police to move in and start making arrests.
Dump the sticks.
Let's see how they do everything with them bicycles. I guess it would be cumbersome with that bike and trying to make an arrest.
Just go on your shoulder. You're good.
Our cameras captured protesters getting handcuffed and taken into custody. We now know that 8 people were arrested. Protesters also set fires, including one inside a dumpster right in the middle of this
Jesus.
intersection. Officers say people threw rocks and bottles at them during the chaos. Savannah Welch is outside the federal building this morning, where people coming into work this morning are seeing a lot of graffiti on the side of the buildings, a lot that we can't show you because it's inappropriate.
That's right, Mimi. There really is a immigration raid of Omaha meat plant cuts staff, fuels food production worries. U.S. meat producer Glen Valley Foods was operating an Omaha, Nebraska facility with about 30% of its staff on Wednesday after federal agents detained workers in an immigration raid the previous day, slashing the output of products it sells to grocery stores and restaurants, the company's president said. In the wake of Tuesday's sweep by
So this is what a lot of the immigrants are protesting. ICE agents are going to places like this meat packing company, like federal buildings. They're going to, they were encouraged to go to like Home Depot and places like that to pick up illegal immigrants. We all kind of have an idea, or most of us have an idea, that a lot of Hispanics kind of converge in areas like Home Depot and areas like that, looking for anyone that's looking for workers, when they need, little jobs done and things like that. We've picked up workers when my mom was alive to have things done at her home, because the house sat on 1.5 acres, almost 2 acres of land. And so after my father passed away and we needed, work in the yard done, we've picked up, workers and things like that. We don't necessarily ask them if they're legal or illegal. We just pick them up. They come, do a great job, and we pay them, and that's it. If we need them for another day, we let them know, can you come back tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. Now, I presume that that's why a lot of them converge up there, because, at places like Home Depot and, Lowe's and stuff like that, because they know that people are going to go up there looking for workers. So I'm not going to say whether or not, I don't know personally if the people that are there are illegal, but I would think that criminals, because we were told that it would be the criminals that would be deported. I'm thinking that criminals are not necessarily out there looking for work. Anything they need, they're engaged in criminal activities to get. So they're not converged at a Home Depot, or they're not reporting to work on a farm. They're not reporting to work at a meat plant. They're engaged in illegal activity. So for ICE agents to be going to a lot of these facilities, they're impacting farmers. They're impacting this meat plant. And the downside is, we as the general public still have our demands. Our demands for this meat has not decreased. Our demands for vegetables that the farmers are harvesting, our demand for that has not decreased. So the fact that ICE agents are detaining or deporting a large percentage of these farmers, a large percentage of these workers, and sadly enough, they're not doing they're not going through the due process before they deport these people. That's what the protests are about. They're not going through the due process. And a lot of these people are being deported to God knows where. Some of these people, of course, have been deported to that major prison outside of the country. And they don't know if these people are affiliated with gangs, if these people have been engaged in illegal activity. They're deporting them without the due process. And so the protests basically are about that. And the Hispanics, the Hispanic community, which is mostly what's out there. Of course, you have Native Americans out there. I've seen some African Americans out there that are also helping them protest. But you have this community of people that are raising up their voices to oppose this kind of these actions, deporting people without the due process of law. And so that's basically it. And it's impacting people like this meat packing plant, because they're losing a large percent of their workers. And it's not necessarily Americans that are willing to go out there and do that work. A lot of Americans are not willing to go out there and harvest these vegetables on these farms. We're not willing to go out there and do that. And especially we're not trying to do that for the exact same amount of pay that a lot of the Hispanic community were doing it for. So they're not only losing a large amount of their workforce, but they're also not able to replace these workers with anyone. Of course, no Hispanics are trying to go back out there because the remaining Hispanic community are afraid, even if they don't have a criminal record here nor wherever they immigrated from. Even if they don't have a criminal record, they're still having fears of being deported, or they're traumatized from whatever they've experienced with the ICE raids or things like that. So even if they were not taken per se, they still have these traumatic experiences that they're dealing with. And so it's sad that this is where we are in our country right now. I'm not sure how many of you guys may remember this beautiful girl here on the screen. This is Ananda Lewis, and Ananda Lewis was a host. She was a model. She was very, very popular back in my youth. She was on MTV and BET, Black Entertainment Television. She hosted on both of those. She had a very big career. So she was very popular. She was the it girl. She was in magazines. She attended a lot of places where the celebrities were. She was on music videos. She did a lot of things in her short life. And unfortunately, on June the 11th, we lost her to breast cancer. Now, she had an aversion to doing chemotherapy and things like that because she had lost her grandmother, she'd lost 2 aunts, and she'd also lost her mother to breast cancer. She witnessed firsthand the complicated things that her mom went through regarding chemotherapy and, all of that stuff. And so she didn't want to go down that path. She felt that our bodies are intelligent, and she wanted to see it, she felt that maybe her body was intelligent enough to work out the cancer, maybe to fight it off on its own. So she didn't want to go down the same path that her mother went down because she saw how difficult it is. My mom also passed away from breast cancer, so I know exactly how she felt losing someone that you love so close to you by breast cancer. It's definitely not an easy process. Ananda had a son who just also, as she was passing away, her son was graduating from middle school. So about 8th grade, middle school here only goes up to 8th grade. So I'm going to say around 8th grade. In some places it goes up to 9th. But he was graduating from middle school as she was passing away. So she does leave behind a young son. And I think it's sad. My heart breaks because I remember seeing Ananda a lot, and I thought, Jesus, she's gorgeous. You'd want to look like her. And she was everywhere. She was graceful, she was intelligent, she was beautiful. She was a beautiful embodiment of a female. And she was very every time you saw her, she was very, very graceful in the way she carried herself. She was very educated in her debates and some of the shows that she did when she did TRL, Total Request Live with Carson Daly. She worked with him. She hosted Teen Summit, which is where I was introduced to her on Black Entertainment Television. She did a show called Teen Summit, and she got a chance to work with youth, and that was one of her passions, was that she worked with youth. I also discovered that she was a carpenter, which, I don't know of many females that go into carpentry. So I found that very, very inspiring. I thought it was interesting. She was also an educator. She involved herself in a lot of things. She considered getting her master's, and she did get her bachelor's degree. So she considered getting her master's in education before she was offered positions with MTV. And so she did go through Howard University. She did a lot of wonderful things in her life. She had a lot of different little things that she was interested in. And as far as what I saw, she dominated in everything that she found herself in. So she was really, a pretty cool person. She was very, vastly educated in a lot of different things. So, she will definitely be missed by her loved ones and her son, as well as all of the lives that she impacted when she was, very present on television, and all of the young lives that she mentored and touched in just interacting with them, the debates that she held, and the different lessons and things that were taught through like Teen Summit. And, just that show impacted a lot of the youth back in the day, because a lot of those subjects that were covered are things that a lot of the youth were dealing with, were battling with, and that show helped a lot of young people. So she's definitely gonna be missed. She's definitely gonna be missed by many. This is a huge story in other news. So Israel has attacked Iran in a declaration of war, and that somewhat involves us by proxy. So this is part of the story.
Israel attacked Iran early Friday with a barrage of airstrikes that took out top military officers and hit nuclear and missile sites. Prime Minister Netanyahu called the attack just the beginning, raising the potential for an all-out war between the two Middle East adversaries. Iran has retaliated by sending a swarm of drones at Israel. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has temporarily...
So, Israel attacked their nuclear sites, and it's kind of a big deal. And so Iran was forced to respond with force as well. And that's one of the larger stories that's going on right now. So I would recommend you guys stay, just kind of stay informed on what's going on with that, because like I said, by proxy, that does kind of involve the United States of America. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was an issue or a claim that if Israel were to get involved in war, then we would have to, join them in war? Is that the good word?
The Iranian regime has called for the destruction of the State of Israel, planning and advancing concrete military plans to do so. Over the past few months, intelligence has shown that Iran is closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. This morning, the IDF began preemptive and precise strikes targeting the Iranian nuclear program in order to prevent the Iranian regime's ability to to build a nuclear bomb in the immediate time frame. We have no choice. We are operating against an imminent and existential threat. We cannot allow the Iranian regime to obtain a nuclear weapon that would be a danger to Israel and the entire world. This operation is for our right to exist here, for our future and for our children's future. The State of Israel has the right and the obligation to operate in order to protect its people and will continue to do so. The IDF conducted significant preparations for this operation. We are well prepared both in defense and offense to defend ourselves. The IDF will continue to defend the State of Israel.
Okay, so there's that. So Iran is not one that you want to have missiles, particularly because they give those to terrorists, basically, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We know that Iran and the United States we're not necessarily friends. So they don't really like us. So we don't want them to have missiles and things like that. And so this is kind of how it involves us. If Israel is kind of fighting them in regards to these missiles and trying to prohibit them from having these missiles and things like that, then and I do have to say that I'm not necessarily as educated on this as I should be, particularly because I'm not one that believes in war. I just don't believe in it. I'm not one for war. So I don't really like to, get involved in it. And I know other people have their feelings about it, but that's just mine. But Iran is not necessarily a friend of ours, and we definitely do have Israel's back. So this is kind of where it involves the United States. If Iran and Israel start to kind of go back and forth, it could be a problem for us. And sadly, I just don't have the confidence in our administration to make all of the best decisions when it comes to the American people. And I find that part scary. That in addition to the Marshall thing and what's going on with the protests, this thing with Israel and Iran, it has me wishing that I could just rent a U-Haul truck, throw all of my things in it, and drive to Canada. The only reason that I'm not doing that now is because I don't know anything about Canada. I've never been. I don't even know if I'd be able to afford living in Canada. But that's definitely what I want to do right now. I strongly wish I could just leave and go to Canada, because I just don't have the confidence in our administration at this time. I just don't. And I do have to say that I have anxiety. I am fearful. And I try to kind of keep an eye on what's going on in the world, at least a surface level when it comes to some things. Other things I'm like all in. But, there are so many stories and so many things that are happening. And I just, the more I learn, the more anxious I become, the more fearful I am regarding leaving my house. Going to, like going downtown for any reason because of the buildings down there. And we have people that are using public gatherings, and we have a large influx of, public, I don't know what word I can use, but things that are happening in public. People use people use these events, large public gatherings, to drive their cars through them, to bring, AK-47s or whatever, to use them on the crowds, and, it's sad. It really is sad, and it's scary. If you're a person that is an activist and you like to get out there and you want to get out there and have your voice heard, and you want to get out there and, practice your, constitutional right to protest, constitutional right to assemble, you're out there doing the right thing. You're not rioting. You're not looting. You're just making your voice heard, giving your presence to a good cause, and for no reason, people use that to end lives. And it's disheartening for me. I'm going to just say, let me give you some background. So I know that I am a Gen Xer, and so I'm not a millennial or a Gen Z or Alpha, whatever. I am a Gen Xer, but I grew up very sheltered, and so there were a lot of things that I did not experience until late in my adulthood. So a lot of things that that I see happening impact me, and I feel them deeply. More deeply, or maybe I'm much more sensitive to these things than like the average person that was living life while I was sheltering. I feel them, and it's like I take them to heart. I certainly I just don't know. My heart breaks, and every time there's another public pew-pewing, every time there's another one, my heart breaks even more. I don't know what's happening to us when we stop caring about each other, about our children. We're ending our children. And I remember a time when, movies didn't include younger persons passing away in any form. Of course, that was also back in the day when, persons of color weren't really on television either, but hardly, at all. We were not represented on television. But it's now so frequent that you see these things. You see these stories about parents that are ending their children that are ending their parents. People that are coming up to public places and driving their vehicles through, or having a public pew-pewing. It's so rampant that it's not even that. I guess people have no value for life. And for me, my brain has a difficult time wrapping around that thought process, because I still believe that children's lives are valuable. Babies are precious. The elderly are precious. The handicapped, are special. Like, I know I'm rambling, and I'm sorry. I guess I just needed to talk. I don't know. I'm sorry for talking y'all's ear off and maybe not doing as much content in this one as I had planned, but I don't want this to be exceedingly long. I just needed to talk, I guess. But if you've made it to the end of my video, I thank you for coming and for watching. I hope that you'll press the like button if this is your first time here, or if you haven't already, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I am trying to do better with putting more content out. I don't know what you guys would want. I have so many interests, everything from true crime to what's going on in the news, and politics to, pop culture. I have a lot of interests, and I don't know what interests you guys the most, or what you'd want to hear from me. Or if you just want to hear me vent some more. I do have some funny stories. But anyway, thank you guys for coming and watching my video. You have a great day. I love y'all so much. Bye.